Hey, Super Dude here, and I'll be honest with you, I've been extremely unproductive recently. My normal upload schedule that I made for myself slipped, and I'm gonna guess has continued to slip before this video has released. Why is that, you may ask? Similarly to lots of people the world over, I got a copy of The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom, and it is the only thing I've been doing with my spare time. I had ambitions to get into the new Splatoon season, I wanted to try my hand at Street Fighter 6 and learn some Jury, play more Root or GTFO or Deep Rock, but alas, it's mostly just been Tears of the Kingdom. So in order to pretend that time was for some purpose, I'm gonna make a video about it. Not that this is a purposeless video, of course, I've had many thoughts about this thing in comparison to its predecessor. Perhaps some of you are already rolling your eyes at that statement. It's hard to not compare Tears of the Kingdom to its father, who I've said multiple times in other videos.
How about Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, whose design was so fresh in the open world space that it quickly inspired copycats and is referenced all the time by other developers when talking about open world game design.
It's hard not to overstate the impact it had on the world. When the Switch came out, there were so few games for a long time after it released that it was hard to justify owning the thing. You had Snipper Clips, this not Wii Sports tech demo, and alongside those, for the day one launch, Breath of the Wild, which remains the fourth highest selling game for the system. People loved this to pieces. They loved it so much it took only a few years for copycats to appear trying to get a slice of that pie. Though it's definitely its own thing now, Genshin Impact started as essentially a Breath of the Wild-like with a much more fleshed out elemental system. That was its pitch. Ran out of things to do in Breath of the Wild? Genshin is a live service version of that where the content will literally never run out. And that is candy to some people. It was almost candy to me, but every time I turned it on and I saw this, I would immediately turn it off. Too cringe for me. What was I saying? Right, for a game so impactful in its genre from the moment it landed and years after, it's hard not to compare Tears of the Kingdom to its predecessor. And God, what big shoes it has to fill. After the teaser for the Breath of the Wild 2 released 2 years after the original, and 4 more years of development ahead of it, the hype would only explode from there. Nintendo was set up, in all regards, to miss the mark. Making a modern-day classic and then being tasked with doing that again? This is an impossible feat, and yet, Nintendo went for it anyway. Attempting to fire straight through the original arrow for another bullseye, they shoot their shot. And shoot it they did. Tears of the Kingdom expands upon the original game to a staggering degree, and there is almost no system or aspect of the original game that hasn't seen some extreme growth in this new one. The exploration is far, far denser this go-around. The power set is similarly dense in how little it directs your hand and the possibility space it gives you access to. The story is leaps above what Breath of the Wild even tried to achieve, and the world is more reactive and lively than it has ever been in Zelda's history. Is this game a masterpiece, same as the predecessor? Yes, unequivocally. Is this game a more dynamite, grandiose experience that shocks and awes than the previous game? Oh, absolutely. Is Tears of the Kingdom better than Breath of the Wild? I don't know. In this essay, I'm going to talk about Tears of the Kingdom, what it does right, what it's like to play it, how the various aspects of the game design mesh with each other to make an even greater immersive sim than Breath of the Wild was, and also to compare all these things to Breath of the Wild. And how even though Tears of the Kingdom is bigger than Breath of the Wild in almost every aspect, I don't think that means better. Here's my thesis. These games, whilst extremely similar, are doing entirely different things in terms of tone and play, and I don't think Tears' tone is better than Wild's, inherently. Gameplay, I think it probably is better, but I'd like to discuss that with you. My opinions on this thing are a contemplative miasma, and this video serves to try and give voice to that swamp of thought. You're essentially my game design therapist now, I hope you enjoy that. Also, though this probably goes without saying, there are going to be spoilers in this thing. I'm going to keep story spoilers to a minimum, but in terms of mechanics, I'm going to be spoiling a lot. Not everything, but a lot. I mean, that is what I do here, so you should know that that is my goal. I'm going to be putting spoiler tags like you're seeing here at the beginning of each section of the video. I'm not going to be calling them out, though. I'm just going to be showing them, so understand if you're trying to watch this in an audio format only, you might hear some things that you weren't anticipating, okay? Again, very light story spoilers, and I will be mentioning when I'm hitting story later on a bunch of mechanical spoilers. This is your only warning. With that preamble out of the way, let's start from the beginning. Both games begin with little fanfare, with Breath of the Wild having Link wake up in the aftermath of a particularly luxurious water spa treatment, and Tears of the Kingdom opening in media res with Link and Zelda investigating some shadowy wisps that are causing people to get sick. After we get past whatever cutscene junk we need to get through, you're dropped into a restricted playpen that teaches you the game's general mechanics. You go to a tall tower, work at collecting your powers, then you're off to the rest of the game. Now's as good a time as any for me to inform you that these Zelda games are unlike anything that's come before, and that they are immersive sims. I've spoken of immersive sims before, link them down below, but for a quick refresher, immersive sims are sandboxes with multiple systems that bump and clash into each other as you play. Some of the better known examples are Dishonored, the older Deus Ex games, and, yes, Breath of the Wild. The element system, the physics engine, and your powers have tons of interesting interactions that can be mined for creative solutions, or just to dork around and see what's possible. Donkey's videos on Wild and Tears are excellent examples of what can be done if you have your mind towards goofing off with these tools. Unlike most other Zelda games, these two make it a point to give you your most valuable tools from the outset. But here's one of our first great splits between the two games. Your powers in Breath of the Wild were a pretty fun time, you're not going to see me complaining. You had Magnesis, where you can manipulate any metal object, Cryonis, which allows you to instantly produce a pillar of ice from any water source. Stasis, probably the most powerful of the bunch, with the ability to freeze almost any object in place, but maintain its momentum, giving it a massive push once the stasis is released. And last but not least, Bomb! Your toolset is varied and allowed for a great deal of creativity in interacting with the world. But here's the thing. Save Stasis, these powers are very prescriptive. If there's water, then Cryonis is probably a good option. Is that door, or orb, or cube, or that weapon, or slate made of metal? Use Magnesis! On the opposite side of that coin, if water or metal isn't present, then those abilities are just plain useless to you in that moment. Bombs are a bit less prescriptive, there are plenty of nice uses for explosions, I suppose, but here's a prescriptive use case for bombs you'll see all over the game. The powers interact with the environment, but only in the areas where they are accounted for, and very rarely in tandem. You can't use stasis on bombs. Ice obviously isn't magnetic. There's very little interplay between powers. You use one, then you move to the other. Except in this very specific case that I thought of, where you can use the bomb to reach something, I suppose. Tears of the Kingdom's opening area seems bigger than Breath's does, though that may just be my familiarity of the plateau making me imagine it as smaller. If it is bigger, my thinking as to why that's the case is to impress upon you what you've just been given. The powers you hold are so much greater in terms of scope and strength that nothing within a shrine could possibly teach you the power of what you're holding. Fuse lets you fuse an object to a different holdable weapon or shield, and allows for some very silly combinations in the hands of the creative or the playful. This ability is kind of in a corner by itself, you're not going to see much crossplay there, but the others? Ooh boy. Ascend lets you earthwalk through any semi-flat ceiling to come out the other side. This allows you to scale structures quite quickly, get out of cave systems with relative ease, or just gain a little height. Recall lets you reverse time for the object you use it on. This is very powerful, and I don't think the open area does it justice. This has almost infinite range as long as the object hasn't despawned, and allows for the object to be rewound from wherever it is. I recommend experimentation to see just what is possible here. Again, it is very powerful. And the absolute strongest of these abilities, Ultra Hand. Remember Magnesis? It was pretty fun to find a metal object in the environment, pick it up, and then just bonk Bokoblins over the head with it, isn't it? Imagine if you could do that with anything not nailed to the floor. Ultra Hand doesn't move as fast, nor has the range of Magnesis, but it can grab almost everything, and more importantly, adhere objects together with this green glue. The opening area heavily gestures towards Ultra Hand's shrine first, and it's easy to see why. Almost every other shrine and side area has puzzles of engineering that require you to build a structure in order to safely get to the other side, and that is in fact the point of this area. In Breath's starting area, you are getting introduced to stamina, climbing, combat, weather, cooking, and tree cutting for some reason. Did anyone ever do this again? These skills were vital in learning how to navigate Breath of the Wild, and while that's obviously true in Tears as well, there's an assumption that you sort of know that already. These robots will tell you a lot of those Breath of the Wild mechanics. The actual environment this time is trying to make you interact with the toolset in order to understand what exactly it is you have here. You are like the main character in a cosmic horror. You do not understand what you're holding yet, and it will boggle your mind when you eventually come to that realization. A quick aside to talk about puzzle design. There is this video that was made by Joseph Anderson critiquing Breath of the Wild for, well, everything really, but I specifically want to highlight his concerns with the shrines, which he labels as the worst part of the game. The Switch, as a machine, is a modular device. Nintendo's view of the console is that pick-up-and-play games work best on it, since you can pull out the Switch on your subway ride to work, play for 20 minutes, and continue on with your day after. Games that allow for modular play are therefore best made to run on the console, grabbing a couple of moons, doing a run in Darkest Dungeon, a day's worth of Pikmin. This is what Nintendo thinks the Switch is best for. In this vein, the shrines fill this purpose for both of our subjects today, acting as small chunks of content to complete, either by finding it in the world, completing a quest for it, or engaging in a puzzle. In Joseph's video, he has a lot to say about the shrines, which I won't repeat in its totality here, but I specifically want to point out his argument against shrines with multiple solutions or shortcut solutions. He argues that a shrine with multiple solutions aren't a good band-aid for poor design, because having a rather open-ended shrine with multiple solutions is a poor puzzle compared to a well-crafted puzzle with one solution. He then goes on to point out this wind puzzle shrine here, and how it is easily broken by someone using stasis on the ball and then running to the end. While Joseph considers this poor design, I don't really see it in the same view. Being able to skip over the puzzle by being considerate of your powers is a very rewarding experience for the player when they do it. Is it good puzzle design? Probably not. And that is the metric by which Joseph is measuring the shrines, to be fair to him. But for the player, the experience of pulling this off feels good, because they didn't solve the puzzle, they thwarted it. Besides, we've all seen people wind bombing to the end of shrines in Breath of the Wild, and rocket shielding is another very spammable solution to puzzles and tiers. While this does cheapen the puzzles, in a game so built on systems, there are many ways to break the sealed environment of the shrines in ways the developers didn't intend. And again, I don't think that's a bad thing. And trust me, it's only gotten worse. The more open-ended powers means that some shrines are just completely left open for you to figure out. Here's a puzzle that many people online have had issue with. Get past this rail, get past these 2 rails together, and then finally 3 rails, with one of them ending early and the third rail not being there at the start. How do you solve this? Here's how I did it. And here are some other varying ways I've seen online, to say nothing of the aforementioned overpowered rocket shield. These shrines have gone even harder into the open-endedness, and a lot of the game's puzzles are structured this way now. Quick spoiler for a thing in the Faron region, skip ahead by this much if you don't want it. Lurelyn's tower is under chronic rainfall with some spikes in front of it. The spikes stop you from entering, but they do burn. Issue: the rain will put out the fire. The solution here, I feel, is obvious. You need to build a structure to put over the thorns so the fire, located over here, can be directed to burn the thorns. This is super cool in my opinion, and is the sort of puzzle that Tears of the Kingdom allows for with this current toolset. Instead of use ice or magnesis when you see the water or the metal, it's an engineering problem that you need to fix up yourself, and that rules. The issue though is Ultra Hand actually takes a while to make happen. You're going to come across these 2 chuckle forks over the course of the game, which are their own styles of engineering problem. But there are enough of them that you will start ignoring them. Like the Koroks in Breath, I have a feeling you're not supposed to do all of them, and even so, it's exhausting after a while. Just do what pleases you, don't worry about the rest. Massive puzzle aside, when you're on the plateau in Breath of the Wild, it's perfectly possible that you didn't even notice the edge of your playpen until it was pointed out to you by the kindly old man. Nevertheless, there is an edge, with the game extending on past that like an exceptionally elaborate skybox. One of the chief considerations when creating Breath of the Wild was this grand sense of freedom. Let players approach the world at their own pace, go where they want, do what they want, how they want to do it. Our first real taste of this is this skybox, in a sense. It's tempting you with things in the distance. See that volcano? See Hyrule Castle looking all menacing? What about what's behind the mountains to the south? Those highlands? Lake Hylia below? The dueling peaks meant to be reminiscent of the original Legend of Zelda box art? Before you are even given the chance to leave, you are being tempted with directions to set off and explore. And while there's definitely a funneled path if you're receptive to cues, it is perfectly possible to ignore those, or even further, never see them entirely and head off on your own path. From here, the triangle design of the game makes it so once you arrive at a waypoint, there will be others within view. Not so many as to overwhelm you, but enough to give a few options. If you happen upon Kakariko Village, Impa will give you most of your main quest for some direction, but otherwise your urge to explore is what's driving the action. Tears of the Kingdom has a lot more complicating the waters in this regard. As you complete the tutorial area, you can see that the clouds below obscure your view of the grounds. It is only after you descend that you get your first real good look at Hyrule, and boy are things different. Random structures litter every surface, you're in the middle of a field with a castle not far off, and the location of every tower and shrine has changed. This is massively disorienting at first if you're fresh from Breath of the Wild, which I think was both the intent and a good decision. This is essentially the exact same map as Wild, so forcing your entrance to Hyrule to be this disorienting stops the immediate comparisons. You could go anywhere you want, but there is an issue. You still don't have your paraglider. At the end of the tutorial in Wild, you were awarded the paraglider, which is a tool that allows for exceptional horizontal traversal and makes falling from any height a non-issue, as long as you have the stamina, that is. You are still without it here, so if you're like me, you'll continue pushing down the story path, so they'll give you your god-dang glider. Let's put a pin in this, we'll come back. When you finally get your glider, you're free to explore. So, where do you want to go? The triangle design is still in place. There are structures in the distance, which reveal other structures once you get there, but there are other motivations than just raw exploration this time. You have buy-in, given that this is a world you've previously inhabited. What's my boy Hudson up to? Is Sidon okay? Did I keep paying property taxes on my house? You want to check out previously seen locations to see old faces anew and see what's changed. Because of this, Tears of the Kingdom doesn't have to try so hard to draw you in with spectacle and cool sights on the Overworld. You already have some sort of buy-in. Because of this, I found myself bored a lot more often when out and about in Hyrule, because fundamentally, it is more of the same. Instead, Tears directs its attention above and below. Before the game's release, all of the promotional material was laser-focused on two things: the Sky Islands, and these dorky dumb building mechanics they put in the game. People just weren't excited for what was on display, at least in the circles I frequent, and I think this was a little bit on purpose. Intended being a little jester, if you will, only showing the early stuff that's on offer, and also hiding a significant portion of the game from view. Breath of the Wild has a single layer to its world, Hyrule itself. In Tears, we have 4. Hyrule, the added caves that have been peppered all throughout the map of Hyrule, so I guess it's more accurate to say 3.5 layers. The aforementioned Sky Islands, which were predominantly featured in the promotional material, and the game's best-kept secret, the depths. The Sky Islands and the caves are the same, mechanically speaking. They are places to find resources, as well as a challenge stuffed into a small area. The islands get a bit more complex on occasion, but they're all in all pretty disappointing in my view. The caves give you a better reason to be interested in walking around Hyrule, so they're a nice addition. The depths, however, are a completely different story. Featuring a map as big as Hyrule itself, the depths have a completely new mode of navigation compared to anything seen in the series thus far. No sunlight pierces the depths, meaning you must bring your own light. You can brighten up the place by navigating to these light routes, which act as teleportation points, giant lanterns that illuminate the space around you, and the method by which you reveal the map depths, so finding these light routes is a priority. But that is complicated by elevation changes and topographical features that may block your view, to say nothing of the enemies found below. And most enemies found in the depths cause damage to your life bar as opposed to your health, meaning travel through the dark is a matter of attrition rather than how many meals you have prepared. There are only 3 ways to regain this damage to your bar: eat a sun item, leave the depths, or find a light route. So everything down here revolves around the light routes. Thanks to the multiple layers present here, we have something resembling a gameplay loop now. In Wild, there wasn't so much a gameplay loop as a conditional at play. Can't enter a place due to the weather or difficulty of the environment. Your 2 answers are to accrue money to buy armor, or make food. How do you make money? Mining, or the more accessible option, food. Everything kinda just went back to cooking for Breath, but here, not so simple. Say you want to explore the depths. What do you need? A light source, and most likely some sunny food items that can counter the life bar damage. The sun items are found on the Sky Islands and very rarely on the surface, and the consumable light sources are found in the caves, so the depths point to the other layers, and the other layers back to the depths. But what if you, like my fiancé, are afraid of the dark and big scary monsters and don't want to explore the depths for exploration's sake? There is something of importance down there that you'll likely want. When you make a vehicle, the operation of that vehicle depends on your battery, which starts out this big. You can use a consumable to regain or buff that charge, but this is all you have at the start. If you want to make it bigger, the resource for doing that is down there. There are actually multiple resource types that go into building your battery, and they're all found below. And I'm not even telling you the full story. Every single aspect of the depths is in some way around the building mechanic, and feeds into making your ability to build with Ultra Hand easier, better, and longer lasting. Rather than the previous loop of food or clothes barring exploration, exploration itself is a necessary step in the process of exploring the other layers, or more accurately, the depths alone. Given its complete hostility, it makes sense that the other layers feed into it, whereas the depths feed into the others indirectly through greater means of building better vehicles more capable of exploring the skies above. This does have some drawbacks though. The triangle design of Breath of the Wild meant not too much was ever in view so as not to overwhelm the player. The new Z-axis means that while on the ground, there's always the sky, giving you an even greater sense of your options, to say nothing your ability to get off the ground of your own volition and ruin the triangle's ability to obfuscate entirely. This game is overwhelming in its breadth, and I see no way of resolving that. That's just an unfortunate consequence of this design. But if you plan to eventually do all of it, no big deal, right? Let's get back to this pin I left behind. Quick warning, I am about to talk about story, but I won't be showing any cutscenes outside the first 10 minutes of the game, and I promise you no further. I do plan on beating this game before editing begins on this video, and I have experienced what I'd guess is 80% of what's on offer. I'm in the endgame. I've seen enough to talk on it so far, so I'm gonna talk in non-specifics about the thing. Skip to here if you want to miss out on all that. Everybody clear? Cool. The story of this game is an exceptional step up in scope and grandeur from what Breath of the Wild was doing. Y'all remember the cutscenes in Breath of the Wild? Mostly relegated to memories and the various dungeons that the game had on offer. They didn't really convey much in terms of action. Rivali and Daruk's memories had these moments of action, and this one of Link protecting Zelda, but that's about it. Most of these memories are more introspective, looking into Zelda's character or her relationship to Link, her champions, the goddess, or her father. Zelda is very much the main character of Breath of the Wild, and the memories highlight this, but they're also pretty static in terms of what's going on. With the Champions Ballad DLC, we get new cutscenes for each of the champions that each display significantly more action than the base game, which I can tell you now was a test run for what we have on display here in Tears of the Kingdom. This story has a lot going on. It is visually impressive, there is action, there is more emotion in almost every scene, and perhaps more importantly, this game's story is alive. It has twists in it, y'all. Upsets. Shocking revelations. This is probably the most Nintendo has put their backs into a high-octane Zelda story since Skyward Sword or Twilight Princess, and I am loving it. I do have one nitpick, and it's with how the memories are delivered to the player this time around. In Breath of the Wild, the memories are tied to pictures Zelda took on the Sheikah slate, and going to those locations helps jog Link's memory so he can remember the time he spent with Zelda. In this game, memories are delivered through these geoglyphs, giant glowing designs that coat the world, which I won't get into any more than that. I honestly hate this, because I feel that the memory system in Breath of the Wild was just so much better. Wild system meant that players must study the picture, and therefore their environment for like structures and landmarks to try and find where the memory is. It encourages you to learn your environs and be mindful of where things are as you look at the world. Contrast that with, hey look, I'm a giant glowing hieroglyph, don't you want a memory? Come on over, come on, don't you want a memory? This speaks to a key difference between the two games, which is both the central point of what I've been talking about this whole time, and not really a game design subject so much as a game feel one. Let's talk about the world of Hyrule, and how 6 years have changed the land in very crucial ways. Game feel, for those who don't know, is the popping noise you hear when you pick up an item in Stardew or Minecraft. Game feel is also the slight stickiness you see in Kratos' axe when he lands a blow on an enemy as it sticks in them for a moment. Game feel is also why the colors and solid lines of the environment start to bleed into each other when moving at high speeds in Need for Speed Most Wanted. Put into words, game feel isn't a mechanical thing like I'm usually talking about. It is the audio, special effects, and animations that give the game its feeling. Jumping in Halo is floaty, in Deep Rock it's weighty, and in Mario it's deeply precise. And these things are consequences of the engine and the design that is trying to elicit a certain feeling in you. I am about to argue that the design of this world and its characters, as we see them in Tears of the Kingdom, gives a completely different game feel in comparison to Breath of the Wild, and how they communicate different tones as a result. The world of Tears of the Kingdom has seen significant development since the defeat of Calamity Ganon 6 or so years ago. While we don't know what's happened before the upheaval, which is the immediate inciting incident in Tears, We can see how the people of Hyrule reacted to this event. There is a survey crew of researchers who are both seeing how the land has changed as a consequence of the upheaval, as well as doing archaeological study on what's dropped down from the culture from the sky. They're a military crew that siege the protection of Lookout Landing, the base of operations that was produced to be a more central hub to the Sheikah's operations here. But that isn't all they do. They can be found moving in squads throughout Hyrule, attempting to take the fight to the monsters in order to thin their numbers and protect all peoples, not just Hylians, but venturing into the lands of the other species as well. In Lookout Landing, we even see a shopkeep who is originally from Lurelin Village. Remember Lurelin? The Hylian town sequestered in the corner of the map that nothing really references, that you can just happen upon naturally? Yeah, those people are here in Lookout too. This tells us a lot about Hylian society in the days since the Calamity. The Hylians are now more organized. They have the capacity to protect themselves, not just in their towns, but to venture forth and take the fight to the enemy more proactively. And they're actively pursuing development as a nation, to say nothing of their response to this new danger being curiosity predominantly. Hyrule has regained its princess, and something about that has changed the people to be proactive, curious, and much more alive than they ever were in Breath of the Wild. And that's not all. Upon helping the various other races in their issues, they will offer aid to Link and the Hylians in turn, bolstering the defenses of Lookout Landing, and helping Link in whatever the story of the game is about. I'm not getting into it. Hyrule is back, and it is thriving. And though this is a very significant setback, they aren't taking it lying down. And that is just so different from what Breath of the Wild had going for it. The Calamity was an attack that came from the inside, turning the Guardians and the Divine Beasts against the kingdom and thoroughly destroying them in quick fashion. The champions were trapped inside of their machines, each dying from the threat found within, and the kingdom was quickly overrun. Everyone dies, even you. Hyrule fell in this spot, as mentioned by an explorer who you can save on the way to the tower there. With the princess missing, the people made their final stand here. And judging by the Malice and the Guardians still patrolling the place, they did not survive. How do you come back from that? With every hero dead or missing, Hyrule destroyed in a matter of days, if not quicker, what would the people do? We can only imagine how hard it was to rebuild what little they could. A century passes before Link awakes in a new land once called Hyrule and takes up his old mission to save the kingdom from Calamity Ganon. Here's the thing I want to make perfectly clear though. Hyrule is gone. It is but a distant memory for all save the Zora, who are long-lived and as such actually hate Link for how he wasn't able to protect their princess, the Zora champion. In this land, most of the scars of the war had healed over. There were still Guardians patrolling the lands, and the remnants of those successfully destroyed or disabled, and Ganon was certainly still a problem, and yet, life continued. The towns were split off from each other, self-sufficient as they had to be, and lived peaceful lives within the safety of their towns. This is less true for the other species, what with the Divine Beasts causing chaos within their borders, but as a whole, this is the fact of Breath of the Wild. The calmer, more introspective memories, the focus on winning a war you've already lost, and yet no one remembers, only those old Sheikah. Otherwise, the world has moved on without Hyrule and its princess. This is the mood of Breath of the Wild, which is that of melancholy and nostalgia. A great horror was done here, and yet, you're here. You remember the good and bad times you had with those you once knew. You walk through this world that continued to grow, continues to heal. In this way, the Silent Princess is a beautiful metaphor for the game as a whole. Zelda tells you that the kingdom's attempt to domesticate the endangered species of the Silent Princess flower, but that all attempts have thus far failed. They can only hope that it is strong enough to last on its own. And look! Throughout the kingdom it can be found, flourishing in the wild. Though tragedy has befallen you and you have lost everyone you once knew, life continued. And in this new world, things are okay. Tears of the Kingdom, however, is not this way. The kingdom's princess has returned, and with a new threat rising to defeat them, Zelda's people rise in turn, eagerly accepting the challenge. I feel confident in saying that Hyrule is, in this game, more dangerous than it has ever been before, but the people are continuing despite this, building new infrastructure, supporting each other, establishing lines of communication and fighting for the safety of all peoples, and Link has the greatest part in all of this, being the one who holds the Master Sword, him alone wielding the blade of evil's bane, the sword that seals the darkness. But he's not alone. Not this time. This is very personal, but I recently had my grandparents on my mother's side both die of disease, one of cancer and one of COVID-based complications. In writing this essay, I had a realization that Breath of the Wild is a game that simulates mourning, those contemplative moments, and the game that lets you rest with the past while appreciating the present. That is what I'm feeling all the time now. Walking through your day, experiencing life when you're struck with a memory of those you lost, of good times and bad. In Tears of the Kingdom is growth past this, continuing to live, establish new connections, and growing from the pain, stronger for having suffered through it, even if you would never choose to have suffered through it in the first place. The past did happen, and it was both wonderful and terrible for how it ended, but with others, with support, growth is possible. Is Tears of the Kingdom better than Breath of the Wild? I don't know. It is greater in scope and in what it wishes to achieve, and though in some ways it is burdened by adhering to Breath of the Wild and in having eyes bigger than its stomach, it is undeniably an action-packed blockbuster of a game that, in my mind, successfully catches lightning in a bottle for the second time by going bigger, with even more freedom of choice and a dynamite story to boot. But that does not diminish or even really overshadow what Breath of the Wild achieved, with its mood, its music, and honestly, its willingness to be boring, to let those broken piano tones play out over the wilderness as you just look over it. Find small secrets left by the wayside of a world you knew, but this new world doesn't. In a microcosm, I can summarize my feelings on these two games with this. Have you ever heard this bird before? This is a whippoorwill, named due to the sound of their bird call, the whippoorwill sort of deal they have going on. I grew up in a house pretty deep in the forest, and most of the summer evenings involved this bird call flowing through the trees. It is a deeply nostalgic sound for me, and reminds me of my childhood home, before we moved and it subsequently burned down and is now no longer in this world. And this very bird is in Breath of the Wild. You can hear it walking through the forest, and it just makes me want to lay down by the trees and stay there forever. I love this bird call more than some people I know. But I've grown up, and I don't live in the forest anymore. Maybe due to climate change, I rarely hear that bird in the wild at all. And in Tears of the Kingdom, I don't hear it much either. Tears of the Kingdom is nearly a perfect sequel to Breath of the Wild, but perhaps because of what I've been through, the soul of the original burns brighter in my eyes, and I don't think it will ever surpass that for me. Thank you for watching. Hello, and thank you for watching to the end. I know that I was asking a lot of you at the ending there, but don't worry, it was asking a lot of me to talk about it, so again, I thank you. A couple of things I want to shout out. Apparently you only have one save file in these games. I didn't know that because I only played the Master Quest, which is technically a different save file, after beating the game for the first time. So basically, I've never tried to make another save file before in these games. All of this to say, I had a completed, beaten, over 100 hours save file of Tears of the Kingdom that I deleted over the course of trying to make this footage. So I ended up asking to ask a friend of mine and my fiance for some footage so I can get some mid or late game content, and here they are in the credits. There you go. Thank you very much for that, or else this video would have been just little baby Link with no pants running around for the whole thing. And yeah, I have a Twitch, though I haven't been streaming on it a lot, mostly because I've been busy. My summers are busy. And also, Tears of the Kingdom has been consuming my soul. But maybe I'll play other things now. I don't know. And yeah, again, I know this was a bit of a pull. Thank you for watching, and I will see you when I do.